Hi class, today we are looking at Chapter 2, Lesson 3, What Was Life Like in the Missions? Let's get started. So the reason for the missions. At one time, Spain had much control over trade. Spain sent Christopher Columbus in search of new trade routes in 1492. Other explorers followed Columbus to find new lands. In the 1500s, Spain began to take over much of Latin America. Conquest over Latin America continued through the 1600s. So, it was no surprise that Spain took an interest in controlling California, too. In 1769, King Charles III wanted to settle and control areas of California. He was worried that if he didn't claim the land, then Russia might. The Russians had strong ties to the land. They were expert fur trappers throughout the Pacific Northwest and already had a solid fur trading business. The king's goal was to create settlements along the coast. This would secure the northwestern frontier of New Spain. King Charles III decided the best way to do this would be to enter with military and religious forces. The religious groups would try to befriend the California Indians so that the settlements would be peaceful. They wanted the California Indians to adopt the Spanish religion and way of life, including becoming tax-paying citizens. Let's take a look over here at this photograph, and the caption reads, in 1798, Mission San Luis Rey had almost 1,000 square miles of land. And if we look up here at our timeline, it reads that in 1769, Spain's King Charles III sends out Spanish missionaries to develop a chain of missions in California. In 1786, La Perouse observes and writes about the Monterey Mission. And in 1798, Mission San Luis Rey is founded. King Charles III wanted to build the Californian coast to be a strong fortress. The settlements would be in a chain, not too far from each other. These religious settlements were called missions and included buildings where people could live, work, and pray. To build the missions, King Charles III sent both religious and military leaders. He chose Father Junipero Serra to lead a group of Franciscan missionaries. Then he chose Gaspar de Portola to lead a small group of military to help protect the missions. Serra and a group of Franciscans set up 21 missions from 1769 to 1833. The chain of missions stretched 600 miles from San Diego to San Francisco in what is now known as the California Mission Trail. Father Serra and the Franciscans strongly believed that the California Indians could and should be Catholic. The group worked hard to convert them, baptizing over 54,000 California Indians. The missionaries believed that this way of life was better for the California Indians. And if we look over here at our map, it's the California missions, the Spanish missions in California from 1769 to 1832. And this is the same one we had looked at last chapter. Why California Indians came to the missions. And if we look up here at the photograph, it says the interior of the mission at Santa Barbara, California. The missions began to grow. For many reasons, California Indians began to live in the missions. Some California Indians came willingly. They were simply curious about the material wealth and abundant food of the missions. Others were interested in its spirituality, ceremonies, and music. Some California Indians were interested in sharing cultures. Many missions offered opportunities to learn about the Spanish culture and language in addition to religion. In the beginning, many missions allowed the California Indians to keep much of their own culture. Slowly, however, that changed. California Indian village life would never be the same. As missions continued to grow, many California Indians could no longer hunt and gather food. The missions took over too much of their land. farming and livestock had destroyed much of the land the California Indians needed to survive. These California Indians who struggled to find food began to turn to the missions for help. Primary source, in their own words. So again, like we talked about last lesson, primary source is somebody who was actually there. It's what they saw, and they recorded what they saw and what they did. So Otto von Kotzebue. Otto von Kotzebue from 1787 to 1846. So remember, the first date here is when they were born. The second date is when they died. While he was a Russian naval officer, he traveled the globe 3 times during his life. He created maps of much of the Alaskan coast and islands in the Pacific. He wrote and published journals of his travels. In winter, and here we have a quote, so this is from his journal. In winter, bands of Indians come from the mountains to be admitted to the mission, but the greater part of them leave in the spring. They do not like the life at the mission. They find it irksome to work continually and to have everything supplied to them in abundance. After several months spent in the missions, they usually begin to grow fretful and thin, and they can constantly gaze with sadness at the mountains, which they can see in the distance. Once or twice a year, the missionaries permit those Indians upon whose return they believe they can rely to visit their own country. Life at the missions. Here we have a photograph. The caption reads, "Life at a mission involved labor and religious work." The missions needed the California Indians as laborers to work the land. They planted and harvested wheat, barley, and corn. The California Indians also tended the fruit orchards, nut and olive trees, the vineyards, and vegetable gardens. Most of these crops were new to California. With the labor of the California Indians, missions began California's farming economy. Mission life was strict. California Indians followed a set daily pattern that had 2 main activities, work and prayers. Most men worked the fields or tended the livestock. Others learned new skills such as carpentry or blacksmithing. The women often made candles, soap, and other items that the missions needed. California Indian labor helped the mission to grow. Missionaries were outnumbered by the California Indians. They depended on California Indian leaders to manage the other California Indians. These leaders were often elders who had authority in their villages. They had to reinforce the mission rules to their people. The Catholic priest depended on these leaders to keep order in the mission. Here we have a daily life in Mission San Luis Rey. So at 6 a.m., the mission bell rings. Everyone must be at church for the next hour. So 6 to 7, they're at church. 7 a.m., everyone eats breakfast, barley and grain soup, called atole. 7:45, after breakfast, men go to the fields to work. Women stay at the mission and do chores. Children learn about Christianity. Oh, and this is Carmel Mission in California. Of course, in California, we're learning about them. At 12 p.m., the mission bell rings for lunch. Corn or hominy chili called pozole. 45 minutes later, men go back to the fields. Women and children do chores. 5 o'clock, the mission bell rings for dinner. Atole again. At 6 p.m., some men return to the fields. Other men sing and play instruments at choir practice. At 8 p.m., women must go to bed. Men get to stay up a little longer to 9 p.m., and that's when men must go to bed. So it's a very strict lifestyle that they had to follow. Hardships. Life in the missions was hard on the California Indians. They were used to their traditional way of life, clothing, and religious ceremonies. The Spanish soldiers forced them to adopt a different way of life. The California Indians were also required to follow a strict schedule during the time they worked for the mission. Many California Indians became severely ill during the mission years. Many of them had never made contact with Europeans before, or the illnesses Europeans brought with them. Smallpox, measles, and other diseases were new to the California Indians who could not fight them off. Missions were crowded, which made the diseases spread quickly. During the mission period, the population of California Indians living in the missions fell from 72,000 to 18,000. As a result, many California Indians wanted to leave the missions. Yet, they found that soldiers would not let them leave. Many peacefully rebelled by practicing their religion and performing traditional songs and dances when nobody was around. Others rebelled by purposefully working slowly or breaking tools. Some ran away from the missions, taking the mission's horses and cattle with them. Others attacked the priests. A different view. There were a few California Indians who enjoyed life on the missions. Pablo Tac was born at the mission San Luis Rey. He had good memories, was a good student, and was treated well by the priests. In 1833, at the age of 12, Tac was chosen to travel to Rome with the missionaries. In Rome, he learned more about the Roman Catholic Church. Tac was able to teach the people of Rome about his native culture. Tac never returned to San Luis Rey as he died in Rome in 1841. Impact of the missions. Here's a photograph of the Pala Band of Lisueno Missions Indians of the Pala Reservation. So that's near here, just south of us. Life at the missions brought many changes to the California Indians. Their clothes, the food they ate, and how they lived began to reflect the lives of the Spanish missionaries. Their hunting and gathering economy changed to a farming-based economy. They pursued the Catholic religion or combined it with their own, adopted the Spanish culture and language, and often married Spanish people. However, California Indians kept as much of their traditional religion and culture as possible. The older California Indians taught younger ones skills and crafts such as basket weaving. Families taught their children the language, dancing, and singing that had been passed down from their ancestors. All right, boys and girls, that's the end of this section. As always, we'll see you soon.